So, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about the OHL playoffs. We only have a couple more power rankings to go, and then it's going to be all best of sevens in the first round. It's exciting times around the Ontario Hockey League. Lots of playoff positioning up for grabs still in both the East and the Western conferences. When you look at the East, it's quite the battle from first until sixth. And then in the West, there's a logjam between fifth and eighth. So let's go over the power rankings, looking at the week that was. Starting off with number 20, the Niagara Ice Dogs. No change for them over the previous week. The Ice Dogs' playoff hopes, they came to an end over the weekend after they lost 7-5 on the road to the Peterborough Petes. The Ice Dogs, they last made the playoffs in 2019, so it's been a tough few years for fans in St. Catharines. The one bright spot, though, for this team going forward, Ryan Robrick, he was drafted second overall last year. He now has 26 goals on the season, which is a franchise best for a rookie. So his junior hockey career, it's going to be fun to follow and a lot of optimism when it comes to the Niagara Ice Dogs in the coming years. They just need to figure out that core and insulate him. And hopefully we'll be talking about playoff hockey next year for the Niagara Ice Dogs. For the week coming up, they host the Erie Otters on Thursday before going to Mississauga. And then they host the Barrie Colts on Sunday. Number 19, the Sarnia Sting. No change for them. Sarnia's playoff chances, they're very faint right now. It's on life support. They're 10 points back of the Flint Firebirds, and they've lost 5 in a row. One more loss or a Firebirds victory this week would end Sarnia's chances. The Sting, they host Mississauga on Wednesday, and if they can manage a win there, then it's going to be a crucial game at home against the Flint Firebirds Friday before traveling to Oshawa. Number 18, it's the Windsor Spitfires. They fell one position this week. The Spitfires, they've officially been eliminated from playoff contention after going 0-2-1 last week. They did that Northern Ontario road trip. Although they did put up a fight on the road against the Sudbury Wolves. They were up 5-2 early in the second period against the Wolves before giving up 5 unanswered, before coming back in the third period to force overtime and then losing 9-8. So quite the battle. I know Wolves fans right now have a lot of concerns about that team. But if you're a Windsor fan, this just shows the potential that this team does have going forward, especially with the likes of Liam Greentree. Put up 2 goals in the game against Sudbury. Now 33 goals, 51 assists, good for 84 points this season. And of course, Greentree expected to be a first-round draft pick at the draft in June. So I know a lot of disappointment. This is a season Windsor fans want to forget, but it's taking shape with the likes of Greentree and company. The Spitfires, they return home Thursday to face Guelph before going to Flint and then back home to take on London. Number 17, we have the Peterborough Petes. They are up one position. The Petes playoff hopes still alive. They're 10 points back of the Barrie Colts. Peterborough, they went 1-2-1 last week. That win was at home against Niagara, snapping their 13-game home losing streak. That's the longest in franchise history for a home losing streak. Despite the team's struggles, they are selling out the Peterborough Memorial Center. So that says a lot about the fan base in Peterborough. I know they won the championship last year, so there's still a lot of excitement in the community. But you have to like what this team is doing. They're shaping themselves up for a good team in a couple years from now. So despite looking like they're going to miss the postseason, there's a lot of optimism with the Peterborough Petes. They only have 6 games left on the season. They need to string some wins together and get some help from other teams to slow down the Barrie Colts if they will make the playoffs. This week, they play a home-and-home against Kingston before taking on North Bay on Saturday. Number 16, the Guelph Storm, no change for them. The Storm started the week big with a win over the London Knights before losing on the road in Sault Ste. Marie and Saginaw. Guelph, they just need 1 point from clinching the playoffs, and they find themselves 2 points back of Owen Sound for 5th in the West. The Guelph Storm travel to Windsor Thursday before returning home to take on Saginaw and Kitchener. At number 15, the Erie Otters, they dropped a spot, although playoff hockey returns to the Erie Insurance Arena for the first time since 2017. The drought in Erie is over, which is great news for the organization, but it was a bit of a challenging weekend for the Otters. They lost both of their games on home ice in extra time, one in overtime and the other in a shootout against the Owen Sound Attack. The Otters, 1 point back of Owen Sound for 5th in the West. So this week, they host London Wednesday night before going to Niagara, and then they host Saginaw. Number 14, the Barrie Colts, they're up one position. For the Colts, they can compete against anyone on home ice. On the road, that's a different story. They went 1-1-1 last week, a huge win over North Bay on home ice. They lost in overtime on home ice as well to Mississauga on Thursday, but they couldn't stop the red-hot Oshawa Generals. Bo Jelsma, we're now riding a 15-game point streak. He's the heartbeat of this Barrie Colts team. That includes a hat trick against the North Bay Battalion. So Jelsma getting the job done. The Colts 10 points ahead of Peterborough for the final playoff spot and 6 points behind Kingston for 7th. This team, they still have 8 games to play over the final 2 weeks. And it would be best for them if they could clinch a playoff spot sooner rather than later and then maybe rest a little going into the postseason. The Colts, they're in Ottawa for an afternoon game tomorrow, and then they host the 67s on Thursday. The Wolves are in town Saturday, and then they travel to Niagara on Sunday. At number 13, the Owen Sound Attack, no change for them, and there will be playoff hockey at the Bayshore this spring. The Attack, they went 2-1 last week, but needed extra time in both of those wins against the Erie Otters. Denny Gore, he was the overtime hero in the overtime win, and which is great to see Gore back on track. They need that offense. They need the depth scoring. You can't just rely on Colby Barlow. You need everyone to buy in right now, and it's all hands on deck for Owen Sound. They're trying to hold on to 5th spot in the West. Owen Sound, 1 point ahead of Erie, 2 points ahead of Guelph, and 4 points ahead of Flint. So the Attack, they do play a 3-3 this weekend, starting in Kitchener Friday before hosting the Sioux and Sudbury. So 3 very tough opponents coming up this weekend. At number 12, we have the Kingston Frontenacs. They fell 1 position. The Fronts, they're able to clinch a playoff spot thanks to a win in Sarnia yesterday. The Fronts, they went 1-1-1 on their West Division road trip, getting 3 out of a possible 6 points. So things looking good for Kingston. The Frontenacs trying to secure at least 7th spot in the East, 6 points up on the Barrie Colts, but the Colts, they do have 3 games in hand on Kingston. Kingston, they play a home-and-home against Peterborough, and then they wrap up the week at home against the North Bay Battalion. At number 11, the Brantford Bulldogs, they fell 2 spots this week. Injuries taking their toll on Brantford. They've been playing without the likes of Nick Lardis, Florian Jacki, and Thomas Homera, and Brantford, it's starting to show. They went 1-2 last week. They lost top spot in the conference after their loss to Oshawa. This is a strong Bulldogs team, so expect them to bounce back, but they have a tough game in North Bay Thursday night before hosting Ottawa and Mississauga, so a very tough schedule ahead. At number 10, it's the Flint Firebirds, no change for them, and I'm sure several fans are surprised to see the Firebirds still this high in the power rankings. They went 2-1 last week, including a 3-2 win in overtime against the Saginaw Spirit. Simon Slavicek was the hero in that game, now points in 5 of his last 6 games. So with big help with his team's strong play before the playoffs, this team, they're pushing. They could be climbing as high as 5th place in the Western Conference standings. And to think, they were fighting for their playoff lives back at the OHL trade deadline in January, and now they're right in the thick of it in the West. So we'll have to wait and see what they can do. The Firebirds, they can clinch a playoff spot this week with a win. They host the Sioux Wednesday before going to Sarnia, and then they host Windsor on Saturday. Number 9, it's the Mississauga Steelheads, the biggest riser. They're up 3 spots. Don't look now, but Mississauga, they're in striking distance of first place in the Central Division. They're riding a 6-game point streak. They have only 1 regulation loss over their last 10 games, and they're 5th in the East, but only 2 points behind the Sudbury Wolves for that division lead. This is a young and fun team to watch with outstanding goaltending from Ryerson Leanders and Jack Ivankovic. And the Steelheads, they do host the first-place Generals tomorrow, so that's a must-watch game. And then they travel to Sarnia Wednesday before hosting Niagara Friday, and then they end the week in Brantford. At number 8, it's the Kitchener Rangers. They fell 1 position this week. The Rangers 2-1 last week, and that includes a loss to the London Knights, which meant they can only finish as high as 3rd place now in the West. So the top 4 teams in the West, very competitive, so it's shaping up to be a very exciting playoff bracket. The Rangers, they do host Owen Sound Friday night before going to Guelph on Sunday. At number 7, we have the North Bay Battalion. They are up 1 spot. Outside of the loss in Barrie Saturday night, this Battalion team has been playing some very good hockey. North Bay 6-4 over their last 10 games and 1 point behind Sudbury for first in the Central Division with 6 games left on the schedule. So top spot still up for grabs in the Central. And Anthony Romani, 1 point away from 100 points on the season and 1 goal away from 50. So 2 big milestones within reach for Romani. And the North Bay forward, he has been outstanding. It's been fun to see what he's been able to do, along with that line of Dalen Wakely and Owen Van Steensel. That is one productive line, and they were actually kind of fun to watch there Saturday. Van Steensel, of course, got a goal in that game, and it's this North Bay team. They could make a pretty deep run, just like we saw last year. The Battalion, they host Brantford Thursday night before traveling to Peterborough and Kingston. At number 6, we have the Ottawa 67s. They fell one position. They went 2-1 last week, outscoring their opponents 11-3 in the two wins against Peterborough and Niagara, and then managed just 2 goals in the game against Mississauga. So Ottawa 6 points behind Oshawa for first in the East with a game in hand. But they need the Oshawa Generals to cool off to have a shot at first in the division. So Ottawa's still fighting for home ice. The division might not be likely, but anything is possible with the way things are going in the Eastern Conference. The 67s, they do play a home and home to start the week against the Barrie Colts before traveling to Brantford. At number 5, the Sudbury Wolves, they went up one spot this week. Sudbury won 1-1, but there are concerns right now in the Nickel City. This team has had an issue falling behind in games. They forced overtime in a loss to the Greyhounds, but against the last place Spitfires, the Wolves were down 5-2 and then up 8-6 in the third period and then needed overtime to beat Windsor. So, yes, the offense is there, but it's the goals that they're giving up, especially against a team well below them in the standings. And then they went into North Bay, and the Battalion, they got the lead in the second period, and they shut down the Wolves. It's great that David Goyette, he's got 101 points on the season, but this defense, they need to step up. It seems like it's a systems thing with questionable goaltending. On paper, this team, they should win the Central Division, but now with the suspensions and then players are not 100%, they're just holding on to a 1-point lead in the division over North Bay and 2 points ahead of Mississauga. So if things don't improve, this team could fall as low as 6th in the East. It just goes to show how tight the standings are right now. Sudbury, they play a 3-3 this week, starting at home Friday against Oshawa. That game's going to be huge. And then they travel to Barrie and Owen Sound. Number 4, we have the London Knights. No change for them. The Knights 2-1 last week, and their win against Kitchener clinched them the Midwest Division for the 5th consecutive year. London continues to get it done year in, year out. Easton Cowan also extending his point streak to 32 games. 2 goals, 3 assists, good for 5 points in the 3 games last week. And the Knights, they are still in a battle for first place in the Western Conference. Today, as at the time of recording, they're tied with Saginaw for first, but the Spirit have the tiebreaker. So that's how it works, settles down there. We'll see if the Knights can start to rest some of their players or maybe reduce their ice time a bit to prepare them for a deep playoff run. The Knights, they are in Erie Wednesday before hosting the Sioux, which that should be a tough game because the Sioux have had London's number this year. They're a team that's beaten them at least twice now in regulation, and they do go to Windsor then to finish up the week. At number 3, we have the Saginaw Spirit. They fell one position. Saginaw, they hold top spot in the Western Conference. They went 2-0-1 last week, but they dropped a position because of that overtime loss in Flint. Saginaw, they are riding a 7-game point streak, 6 points ahead of the Greyhounds, who've also been on a roll. The Spirit, they'll look to move closer to clinching the West Division with stops in Guelph and Erie this week. At number 2, we have the Greyhounds. They're up one spot. Sault Ste. Marie, they are making a push to try and catch Saginaw, or at least have some momentum going into the playoffs. They were 3-0 last week, including an overtime win in Sudbury where Gavin Hayes was the hero. And Hayes, one of the best pickups at the OHL trade deadline for Sault Ste. Marie. Since the trade, 17 goals, 16 assists, good for 33 points in 23 games of work since that trade from Flint. Sioux, they're riding an 8-game point streak, 6 points back of Saginaw for first. And for the Sioux, they're on the road this week for 3 games. Stops in Flint, London, and Owen Sound. And finally, number 1, it's the Oshawa Generals for the 2nd week in a row. I know there's been a lot of focus on the Western Conference teams this season, but what Oshawa is doing right now deserves attention. Oshawa 3-0 again last week, wins over Ottawa, Brantford, and Barrie. They put up at least 5 goals in all 3 of those wins. The offense, it's just firing on all cylinders. The Generals, they're riding a 7-game winning streak. They're now first in the Eastern Conference, 1 point ahead of Brantford and 2 points ahead of Sudbury. Callum Ritchie, he has been outstanding. He's riding a 7-game point streak. Dylan Robrick, he's on a 6-game point streak. And Connor Lockhart, points in 3 of his last 4 games. So this team getting it done offensively. Plus, you've got the solid goaltending of Jacob Oster. The defense also shutting things down. They only allowed 1 goal in the game against the Barrie Colts. So this is a good Generals team. We'll see how long this momentum lasts. I think Oshawa could take that top spot in the East once this regular season's over. And if that's the case, we could be looking at an Oshawa-Barrie first-round matchup. So you'd have Connor Punnett against his former team against Thomas Stewart against his former team. So quite the storyline if that is to happen. The Generals are in Mississauga tomorrow night and then Sudbury Friday. So 2 top teams from the Central Division. So 2 huge tests. And then they host Sarnia on Sunday. So that's the power rankings for this week. Still a lot of excitement to go. Let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on the week that was, and what are your predictions? Who's going to end up tops in the West and tops in the East as we get ready for the playoffs in just 2 weeks' time? So again, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.